Video number 2 in our series, the plane. This is a plane, and it's the same plane that would be in geometry, and we'll get into that a little bit later when I don't use this. But you'll notice that I have this adjusted at an angle, and I kind of had to prop it up because it only comes with two adjustments in the box for driver and iron, but for the purposes of this explanation in these videos, I want to be more exact than that. I have this at the same angle as my 9-iron. This would be the plane that you would want to swing on with your 9-iron club. You'll see that anytime two planes intersect, they share a common line. That's simple geometry. In this case, I laid a plastic strip down I got from the lumberyard, and that'll designate our target line. The other thing I want to point out now is that when I teach plane and view plane myself, I want the camera right on the plane. And in this case, it's a little bit in front of the plane so that you can see what's going on in the demonstration. A lot of videos that are formed like that, or a lot of people just think down the line is good enough for a lesson for swing plane. Camera angle will lie to you. If the camera's in a different spot, it looks like you may be on or off plane, and it's the camera angle that's doing it to you. So I like to set it up, and I'll show you how to do that in another video. I like to set it up so that the plane is exactly, all you see is a wafer-thin plane, so you know that the person that you're trying to teach, you know that their club is on that plane. If you're in an angle, you don't know if they're swinging in, out, or out the end, or if they're on plane or not. It may look like they're on plane when they're really not because the camera angle. So we'll look at that a little bit later. So you can see here that if this club stays on a plane, the head points, an extension of the head would point at the target line, and therefore the extension of the grip would point at the target line also. That's why when you put a laser in your golf club, you can see when you swing it, if you're pointing the head, at the target line, eventually the grip end would point at the target line, and then in a downswing, you pull the grip down the target line and let the head flip itself over automatically on the target line. And you'll see that you'll always form the same plane. You probably noticed on the insert in the left-hand side that I had a club with two lasers in it. I actually made a double gripped club to show that there's no difference whether you point the head or point the butt of the club during the swing. They always both point at the target line. But you don't need a double-ended laser, and you're better off practicing with the implement you're going to play with. When it comes to any training, the transition from training to playing is smoother if you're actually using the implement you're going to be practicing or playing with, rather than a mock club or a training device that's really not a golf club. So you don't have to spend twice as much money on two lasers either. So I'll show you when we get into using the plane sight to practice with how you can do this same drill with one laser. That's how you use the laser to see if you're on plane. What I have here I made myself. It's a piece of thick cardboard that I cut a profile of my 9-iron out of that cardboard, because I want to show you what we have to do when we're swinging the golf club. If the ball is there and that's our impact point, we have to move this thing through space, and right at impact we have to get the right angle, the right loft, and the right squareness of face to do that. And if we don't swing on plane and we rely on practice and athleticism, that's a lot of movements to try to time. You have to time when all those things come together at the right spot. And if you're below the plane, then you're actually moving your hands through this movement pattern. You're actually pushing your hands out to get onto that plane when you need to. So you have to know when to stop pushing and time that. That gives you your right angle. Then you have to also, if you're not putting the forces we want, which are pulling forces, we'll discuss that later, But if you have to time when you're rotating your hands, then you have to time when you stop pushing it as you're rotating. So that all becomes very complicated. It's not right or wrong, but it's just harder to do than what I'm going to show you we need to do. So you can see, if you're on plane, then the simple fact is, when you're on plane, your club just travels down that plane and automatically goes through that slot if you let it. And that has to do with how we put forces into the club. So you can see this is much easier to swing on a plane instead of being off of a plane and trying to time when you're getting into that position at the right time. You're timing this, you're timing this, you're timing the lean of the shaft. So that's a lot going on to have to control that. Remember, timing is controlling when an event happens. You can try it that way. You've probably been doing it that way until now anyway. But this is going to be a much easier way. When you learn to swing on plane and you let the natural forces release itself, it's going to go right through the slot. Consistency improves, and you'll be able to actually probably swing your club faster with it, with forces on plane. I'm going to use this piece of cardboard now to represent my plane as I explain a couple more things about line segments on a plane and geometry, and why the line segments represent our golf shafts. I'm going to use these two dowels because they're a little easier for me to handle here than two golf clubs. But the other thing that swinging on a plane does for you, it takes care of your path issues. You don't try to move the club head path different than the swing path. And I was always confused when I was trained with TrackMan, even tried to get answers to my satisfaction on their definition of plane and club head direction and plane direction. I never understood how if you're on plane they could be two different things. I'll show you here that if you're on plane, your plane intersection line with the earth, which would be your plane line, not your target line, but your plane line, would always be your club head path if you're on plane. So you control your direction by being on plane. That's a setup issue, and you'll be practicing with your laser so you know you're swinging on plane, so you'll have a good idea where your club head's going to go. So once you do your swing with the forces we need, all your energy can be put into just pulling the club on plane. You don't have to try to guide it because it'll automatically go where it needs to, since you learned how to swing on plane. So for this demonstration, if you can see this faint yellow line, that's going to be our target line. Because your plane line won't always be your target line. If you're trying to hit a draw, you'll want to go inside out, or if you want to hit a fade, outside in. But it's not by bringing the club head inside squared inside, or outside squared outside, or all these different confusing things you see in golf magazines. It's simply a factor of what happens when you swing on plane. And I'll demonstrate that too. You'll see that if this black tape represents the club head, if you're on plane, and the plane line in this case, let's say we're trying to hit it straight down the plane line, not a draw or a fade. So you can see as my club head comes back, if I drop the line straight down, it would make a mark here. And as I come back, it would make a mark here. And if I come back, it would make a mark here. So if you're looking in a two-dimensional world, from an overhead view, it would look like my club head is coming inside. And it would look like on the way down, it's going back to square and then inside. But to me, that always confused me in the beginning of my golf career when people would tell me swing inside out. I would try to get the club close to the ground where I could see it going inside out. So that's obviously not a plane. I'm swinging it in some kind of a conical shape, not a plane. So I don't like to use those references if the club comes inside. No, it stays on the plane. It stays on the plane at all times. If you're looking at it in two dimensions, it would maybe look like here it's square, and here it's coming. If I had chalk in the end of this and I followed that around, I'd be drawing you an arc on the ground. But that's confusing to me. So I don't want you to be confused by that. You'll see that the club will always stay on the plane. And if I wanted the club head to move in that direction, I wouldn't try to move it that way on a path. I would just turn my plane this way, and then I would still swing on the plane, and then the head would travel down that target line. So if you can see by this target line, there the plane line lays right on top of the target line for a straight shot. That's if the face is square to the target line and the plane line. And then if it's plane line is slightly in the out, crossing the plane, and the face is square, not to the plane line now, but still square to the target line, you'd hit a nice little draw. If it was square to the plane line, it would stay straight where the plane's pointed. So, conversely, if it was a little crossing the line from out the end, people would say this is over the top. It isn't. It's just if you stay on plane, all it would do if your face was square to the original target line, it would hit a nice fade. You would have guests come by every day about this time. And if it was square to the plane line, then you just hit the shot that went straight where the plane is pointed. So you can learn to work the ball. There's only 3 ways the ball goes if you swing on plane. It always starts down the plane line and finishes where the face is. So you can hit 3 shots on plane. Now those 3 shots, you can aim 3 different ways. You can aim them to the right and hit those 3 shots. You can aim them down the center and hit those 3 shots, or you can aim them to the left or left to target and hit those 3 shots. So you can work your ball around the golf course. If you don't swing on plane, there's 27 different ways the ball can go or more combinations when you're not on plane. But if you're on plane, 3 times 3 is 9. Point those 3 different ways, and you've got it. You've got a way to work the ball around the golf course, and it doesn't get away from you. Like trying to remember all the different combinations if you don't swing on plane. So that's my explanation of direction with the plane. Now, the other thing I want to point out, in geometry, there's something called a skewed line. Now, in geometry, if 2 lines are parallel to each other, they can lay on the same plane. Anywhere they are, if they're parallel, they can share the same plane. If they're not parallel, then if they were extended and they would eventually cross, they can lay on the same plane. So it doesn't matter where they are in a non-parallel position. If they were extended, as long as they would touch, they could occupy the same plane. But skewed lines, the definition of a skewed line is a line that is neither parallel nor an extension of that line would touch the other line. They can't be on the same plane. I have 2 9-irons here. So if I'm swinging the 9-iron in my right hand, if that's my swing iron, the iron I'm going to swing, and this is the image of where it was before I moved it. If it ever moves in a way where those are not parallel to each other, and it won't be, except they'll never be parallel to each other, but if this is the shadow of this club, or the ghost image of this club, if I ever swing it in a way that it gets in a position where we know it's not parallel, but if it extended, it wouldn't hit this club, then you're off of the plane. You're off of the plane that this is on, or this is not on the plane that this is on. So that's why it's important. You don't want these to become skewed lines. When you swing them, you want them to always follow the same plane. And they would be on a plane. But if you ever bring this club, a lot of people on their takeaway, they bring it inside. Now, this obviously would never cross where it used to be in any part of the swing. So even though it makes an arc and it makes a smooth path, it's never on its own plane. Nothing wrong with it, but then timing becomes critical. If this is where you want it to end up, and you're taking it somewhere else, and it's off of the plane, then it's your job to move it and time. When you get there, you got to time. You got to either push your hands out if you're under the plane. If you're over the plane, you got to pull it in, and then you got to worry about rotating it and where it's going to make contact with the handle. Gives you your loft. So So there's a lot going on there that you don't have to worry about if you stay on the same plane when you swing the club. So that's an example of being on plane and skewed clubs not being on plane. This concludes the explanation of the plane and why we want to use the plane in this system. The next video is going to address the forces that we're going to learn to apply to move these clubs through space, and how doing it with forces this way on plane will make this a timeless golf swing. I'll introduce you to a mechanism I made to demonstrate this, and you'll see when I swing it that it can be swung at different speeds and it still automatically releases on its own. I'll also show you the difference between a single lever and a double lever system by using a carpenter's rule that I swing to show that you can generate much more club head speed with the same RPM by introducing the second lever. If you haven't already subscribed, I hope you do, or you can just keep watching these one at a time. I will label them. This is the one we just finished, is the second one in the series. The first one was the introduction to understanding swing playing. The next one will be number 3, which will be the forces video. So click the subscribe button. Look at the links in case you want to buy a laser. I'll put links to the PlaneSight website and to the eBay site where you can order the PlaneSight.